tell us a little bit about, how this year's events, kind of affected S&C Electric. So how's the organization, coping right now?
We, as an essential business, had to find a way and felt the responsibility to really find a way to keep our operations running without interruption, while at the same time keeping our team members safe. And we invested very early on in a very significant communications campaign around keeping the lights on, so people could relate to the mission and at the same time could really understand what was expected of them, whether they would work from home or whether they would come to the office to actually manufacture and make the equipment for selling. And the day-to-day operation never changed. So we continued producing at the same capacity. Obviously, the protocol of safety around people and caring for people and making sure that health and safety was at the core of the priority was the main change. But early on, since April, we've been, monitoring health, taking temperature, checking people's symptoms to make sure that we could continue those operations.
Did you have, a head start on this as you got into it, or what was your experience or some of the obstacles to actually, kind of really making this work?
Half of our team members have to be on site to be doing their work, right? I mean, that's I would say the core of what a manufacturing operation is about. Now, you don't overnight and very quickly revamp and reorganize your manufacturing production flow to keep people 6 feet apart. I mean, essentially, March 12th, everything's fine, and March 15th, everything has shifted, and we've got to reinvent the way we're producing. And there was a massive mobilization by tremendous amount of people all over the company, on the production side, but also on the support function, to come together and say, okay, let's think about the plan and let's the experts think about the plan, how we're going to reconfigure the production line, how we're going to create separations, how we're going to install sinks so people can wash their hands all day. I mean, I'll save you some details. And we had all this mobilization of people coming literally over 3 or 4 days and doing the work together, so that the following week, middle of the week, everything was running again and we were able to go back on track.
How do you kind of explain how you were able to do that?
As you walk into S&Cs, it's not unusual to meet people who've been here 25, 30, 35 years, right? That's actually the norm somehow, right? People come here and they expect to retire here and to spend all of their career here. So that attachment to the company is very strong. So we didn't have to do much to actually get people to come together and come help. I mean, as we started going through, we started getting people saying, hey, how can I help? Can I come over? Can I actually staff the booth that's going to be checking the health of the other people who have to come on site? Something you need to also know about S&C is that we are an employee-owned company, right? I mean, ultimately, we're an ESOP, so through the structure, I believe team members fundamentally think about the company as their company and think about the fact that they're going to volunteer and come work as something that's part of their life.
There's multiple sort of upheavals kind of going on right now. There's the COVID piece, and then there's also, diversity inclusion and, a lot of business transformation. How have you, sort of navigated, so many different crises at once?
The first aspect we had to navigate was to bring everybody at peace with the fact that no one's life was lesser than someone else's life. And because you bring some people in the office because they have to work from the office doesn't mean you think less of their safety and their health than the ones you've sent back home, right? So we did a lot of work and communication around that, around the fact that we were keeping people at home when we could to keep the others safe, right? And that somehow keeping that balance was serving both sides, that we needed both sides. So lots of communication, and there's nothing else you can do than really communicate and explain and acknowledge. So it's not just some grumbling and people feeling upset about it, but you call it out. We started some massive thank you campaigns for the people who had to be on site. So all of our team members were asked to, well, if they were willing to, shoot some small videos with their kids around our equipments to actually thank the ones who were coming here. And that went such a long way. I know I went by my kids' school and we were shooting a video by one of the S&C equipment saying thank you to the people who are making them. But think about it, right? You're here and you're making the equipment and you actually feel that appreciation, and you feel that what you're doing actually matters. And since at the same time we're spreading out things in a way that was really safe, we very quickly managed I would say the level of cases and the level of safety extremely well. We obviously tracked everything that was going on, but lots of education, lots of access to sanitizing stations, things like that, so that as you were here, you felt just probably safer than you felt when you were at home or walking to your grocery store, right? And that was a little bit of the tagline. The second thing that obviously in those past 6 months, I guess none of us was, thinking about was all of the social justice and everything that happened after the murder of George Floyd, right? And as you know, we're an extremely diverse company. About 64% of our workforce here in Chicago is coming from a racially diverse background. So there's never an easy way to look at how diversity is made up, because we're all diverse, right? We all bring something to the table. So I don't like to limit that to the racial aspect, but since this is what we're talking about here, I think it's relevant to the conversation. When we bring at the lower level, at the entry level of our manufacturing operation, that ratio actually goes to 80%, right? 80% of the team members are coming from a racially diverse background. So we've always had that very high on our agenda, right? Promoting people, giving means to people to get education, giving ways for team members to, yes, enter at the first assembler level, but kind of know there's a path forward for them, has always been a priority at S&C. But when events like the ones we had this past month happen, there's a duty you have as an organization to communicate and acknowledge and open up the dialogue above and beyond anything we had done before. Because it's one thing to be having diversity and inclusion, steering committees and programs. It's another thing to create an environment where your team members feel safe talking about their race, talking about their experiences, talking about what this means to come from, whatever background you want to choose in that diversity equation. So we invested a lot of time on creating that safe place for dialogue. By the way, learning from, I've been through one of the ExecOnline program about diversity and inclusion last year. So very useful to also kind of put in action some of the things I had learned with you not so long ago.
That's great. So I imagine like you had to bring a lot of development online, during this time as well. Is that the case? And, what was the experience like, with that part of it as well?
We just kicked off our Aspiring Leader program this year, which is designed to support the same team members I was talking about who are just, coming to the company, don't know what their path's going to look like, and help them first understand what leadership is about. Second, start getting some education. And by the way, we are plugging in it some of the ExecOnline modules, right? So we have that connected into our offer. And this year has been a great opportunity to not even think about whether this program was going to be online or in person, because there was no option. And I think that helped us really move forward very fast with an online offer that really responds to not just a leadership need, but also kind of a social justice and supporting our entry-level team member in an effective way.
Talk a little bit about, sort of leadership, sort of right now in terms of human-centric leadership, putting people first.
Clearly, the need to bring the empathy and the need to be a servant leader, not just for the purpose of the customers, because I think we had great leaders serving customers in our organization. We're very customer focused, and And there's not an ounce of self-serving aspect to any of our leadership. I think everybody's always got the customer's interest in mind, but shifting that empathy for the customers to a greater empathy for one another, and empathy for, the background that people come with when they join us. And maybe they didn't have the same education as some of our, most advanced engineering jobs have, right? And maybe they haven't had a chance to properly learn English. And this is not just a question of staffing jobs on the manufacturing line, but having leaders who can show empathy for what's been the journey of someone who came to the US on a, lottery green card, got a job in manufacturing, and yet could probably be a lot more because in their own country, they had a master's degree in something that's not recognized here, right? So kind of really having the empathy to understand people's journey and come meet them so we can support them in their career evolution. We also worked on the empathy for one another, and here I'm talking about more of the office side, the professional side of the story, where, suddenly the feeling of being overwhelmed by your life, right? Overwhelmed by your kids being home, overwhelmed by your parents being away and not knowing when you're going to be seeing them, and being able as leaders to talk about it and not have to apologize because kids are walking into a room as you have a meeting, right? And not to have to apologize because one day you're down because you heard some terrible news about someone in your family or in your friends. So we did a lot of work to also kind of get better at managing our emotional intelligence. Because as an engineering company, we're very good when it's very analytical and when it's kind of there's a rational to things. But we had to do a lot of work on that emotional side and empathy side.
You were talking earlier about values and how great the values are. Is it going to become a different organization after all of this?
I believe a lot of organizations are not going to be the same after that, right? So I hope we will change for the better. I'll give you maybe 2 or 3 things that I think have and will fundamentally change who we are as an organization. The first one is very basic. We were a very traditional organization when it came to flexibility at work and work arrangements, and kind of had, that 100-year-old belief that if you were not in the office, the work wasn't being done, right? Yep. And so we're very carefully talking about how we were going to start piloting a 1 day per week here and there, working from home, see how it was going to go. And guess what? That world caught up with us. So yep. I think we kind of had to jump ahead like everybody else. So that's the simple level. I think we are coming out of those past months different on the diversity and inclusion side. We've always had a very strong D&I program, but we've always had a D&I program that was much more of a top-down initiative, much more of all the right things you have to do when you do D&I. You've got to train people, you've got to hire diverse, you've got to look at, different pools of candidates. And we've shifted that to make it much more of a grassroots, team member driven initiative. Thinking about, how as leader, we had a very hard time reacting to the death of George Floyd, and how we're much better equipped having dialogue to understand what it meant for our team members. And once we got to realize that, why don't we empower our team members to come guide us as an organization on what matters to them and what would make their life easier and what would make them feel more included. So I think we'll come out, and we are coming out with a differently structured D&I program that gives much more voice to the diversity. The third aspect, I think, where we're coming out of the crisis a bit different is I think we're going to have an organization that's going to be much more agile in terms of empowering leaders much lower in the organization. And that has to do with this volunteering effect I talked about earlier. There was no way that just a handful of people could take care of the situation, right? And we're so impressed to see how people just took charge and took accountability. I'll give you an example. When we had to keep running operation, there were literally no masks available in that market, right? You remember in April, like you couldn't find a mask. Well, we had a few early carrier leaders who came together and say, you know what, give that to us. We're going to figure out a way. We're going to distribute, fabric and stuff, and we are going to make as many masks as you guys need to be able to keep running the business from a manufacturing standpoint. You didn't have to get involved. Like 3 days after, we had thousands of masks just coming in. And it's been so refreshing to see how, once people are empowered, they just do miracles. So it's been, I think, an eye-opener in a fairly traditional organization to see that level of empowerment and the result it drives.
We at ExecOnline, we see a need for like development equities. How do you expect L&D to, leadership development to kind of evolve at S&C with that sort of concept in mind?
We have a gap, just like I guess a lot of manufacturing organizations, between the access to development and education between our hourly manufacturing workforce versus the professional side. We do, and we've always had very clearly defined career paths for our manufacturing team members, right? I mean, it's always been clear in our job design what you need to do to go get the next job, to earn more, to make more per hour, to gain new skills, new manufacturing skills, and so on and so forth. What's never really been completely clear is how do you raise your hands if you want to become a supervisor, because that's how it started, right? Supervising others on the production line. And then hopefully, if you're a good supervisor, really stepping into bigger leadership roles. And that's where you have complexity, right? Because this is where you really need to have an inclusive way of getting people to raise their hand and have a safe way for people to raise their hand. Because for someone who's always, who's never been around leadership, it's pretty scary to think, hey, I want to be a supervisor. I mean, that's not necessarily desirable. So that's really our main focus right now, is to create the safe place where anyone can say, hey, I want to know what this is about, and I'd like to get some level of understanding and education that's going to help me understand if this is for me, and that's going to help me understand what I need to do to become a leader. So we took the current supervisors out of the equation. So we're not making it, a selection process anymore. That used to be the case. You used to be selected by your supervisor to go through training. So now it's completely inclusive. So all you need to do is raise your hand. We've made it easy in terms of really doing it at a level of time commitment that anybody, even with, a time job on the production line, can actually handle. And we're in the middle of it, we're also ramping up technology. Because the challenge we have is that most likely the team members we're talking about here do not have a laptop, right? They do not have a desktop in the office. They do not have a place. And we used to have shared desktop, but with COVID, you can't really share equipment anymore. I mean, that's not necessarily the safest thing to do. So massive investments in tablets and personal cheaper tablets that every one of our team members on the manufacturing front is going to have. So they also have the hardware to go and sit in a quiet room and get their education.
So I want to talk a little bit about ExecOnline. How are we helping you with the transformations that you're...
Kudos to all of you for, as this started, to being by our side, right? I mean, we felt all of you by our side in terms of offering to help, reopening and reshuffling your offers so we could, get people through managed uncertainty and the different programs very quickly. So we really appreciate the support. There are really three main offers, three main programs we are investing in and we really want our leaders to go take right now because we think they're so spot on. First, we are using your Launch into Leadership module as part of our Aspiring Leader program. So our Aspiring Leader first gets an overview to team members about what leadership is, but once they advance in the different modules, we want them to take Launch into Leadership as the core module of becoming a leader. We think that's a very effective way of doing it. We've had quite a few people early on going to managing uncertainty, but we are going to do a second wave. I think we had 6 or 7 going very early on, and they gained so much from it that, as we know now, the uncertainty is here to stay. It's actually a good thing to keep, training people on managing virtually and making sure they get equipped. And then, I told you we had, and we discussed that last year, but we had deployed the fostering inclusion and diversity last year in 2019 ahead of everything that's happened this year. And it's proven to be so useful that we are also going to do a second wave and much broader wave, and making sure that leaders at a certain level get a chance to sit through the program and learn.
So what have you sort of personally learned, from all of these crises?
This is so overwhelming that at some point, as a leader and a leader in HR, you've got to remind yourself that there was no script, right? That there was no training or no preparation you missed somewhere that would have prepared you to deal with that. So what I've learned is, that it is overwhelming, and that being able to express how overwhelming and accept to be vulnerable in terms of not trying to control everything, but really rely on others and rely on your team and rely on your colleague is so important. So I've stopped trying to shoot for perfection, and I think that kind of helped, because as you lead through the crisis, through the homeschooling, through the social unrest, through the parents being in Europe and not being able to see them, that's kind of a lot, right? So I'm immensely grateful for my colleagues here, because I think we really come from a place of care and a place of watching for one another. I told you, as we shifted to a virtual world, as we had to reassemble our manufacturing operation in a different way, I have been completely overwhelmed to see how much care for one another and empathy was helping us and was helping us deliver and achieve. So it's something you know as a leader, but I think as you experience it, you never lead the same way after that, because it's been really enlightening and it's been heartwarming to see that happening. I've been so impressed by how our early career leaders have stepped up. And so the whole generation questioning or discussion on how prepared people are and what do they need to get ready and so on becomes a little obsolete. Because I think when people have the passion and when you trust them with something, it's absolutely impressive to see how much can get done and how people need very little guidance to get going.
What advice would you give to other sort of HR leaders, as they're trying to really prepare and build out their future-ready leaders?
I would tell them to stop over-engineering their talent processes. I think we're over-engineering talent processes in the sense that, we like to have boxes and we like to label people and we like to calibrate and we like to have the perfect assessment that tells us exactly how far someone's going to go. And I think as we step back and look at what happened, it really comes down to the, willingness to support, help, and be part of what's going to make a company grow and keep moving. That truly matters. And that when we give experiences to people, experiences to young leaders, that's really how you see what someone is made of, right? You give them a mission, you give them a task, you give them a part of the problem you're trying to solve, and you see what someone's made of. And you don't need necessarily endless calibration discussions to then see what someone can do. As we all invest and continue to invest in leadership development, we're going to need more and more of those servant leadership, of those leaders who understand others and who understand and relate to other people's journey. So I would say if that's one choice you have to make, go for the servant and caring leader type of education.
Great conversation. Always wonderful to talk to you, and looking forward, to more. So thank you.